Her baby was born with the same hair streak. She's in shock when she finds out why. Emily had always considered herself a pretty average person. At 28, she was living a quiet life in the same Pennsylvania town with her husband, Mark. They were the kind of couple that seemed destined to start a family. A pair who spent their weekends painting the nursery and excitedly discussing baby names. As the due date approached, Emily could barely contain her excitement, even as the inevitable nerves set in. But there was something else about Emily that had always set her apart. A detail so small, yet so striking, that it was impossible to ignore. A single streak of pure white hair that ran through her otherwise dark brown hair. She'd had it since birth, and over the years it had become her signature feature, a little mystery she carried with her. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. The day finally came when Emily went into labor. The hospital room buzzed with anticipation, the usual mix of nerves and joy as Mark held her hand, reassuring her with every contraction. Hours passed in a blur of pain and determination until finally, the cries of a newborn filled the room. A baby girl perfect in every way. Emily's heart swelled with love as the nurse carefully placed the tiny bundle in her arms. But as she gazed down at her daughter for the first time, something caught her eye that made her breath hitch. A small, unmistakable streak of white hair, identical to her own. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, thinking perhaps it was a trick of the light. But there it was, clear as day. Mark noticed it too and laughed, saying their daughter had inherited her unique little trait. He saw it as a cute coincidence, a funny story to tell their friends and family. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. She smiled at Mark, hiding the unease that was beginning to creep into her thoughts. Later, as the baby slept soundly in her hospital bassinet, Emily found herself staring at the streak of white hair. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't yet answer. The connection felt too strong to ignore, too significant to dismiss as mere genetics. As she lay in the hospital bed, exhaustion pulled her towards sleep. A small voice inside her whispered that this was just the beginning. Weeks passed and Emily's life settled into the rhythm of caring for a newborn. But the unease that had started in the hospital lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. Every time she looked at her daughter's hair, that white streak seemed to catch the light in a way that demanded her attention. It was as if it was asking her to notice, to question, and so the questions began to circle in her mind, refusing to be ignored. At night, when the house was quiet and still, Emily started having strange dreams. They were always the same. Her mother, who had passed away years ago, standing in a foggy, distinct place. Her mother's lips would move as if she was speaking, but Emily could never hear the words. Each morning, she woke up feeling more unsettled, the dreams lingering at the edge of her consciousness like a half-remembered conversation. One weekend, Emily's family came to visit, eager to meet the newest member of the family. As they gathered around the baby, admiring her tiny hands and feet, the streak of white hair inevitably became the topic of conversation. When her grandmother saw it, she went pale, her expression shifting from joy to something more serious. She quietly remarked that Emily's mother had been born with the same streak, just like Emily and now her daughter. The room grew quiet as her grandmother shared this, her voice carrying a weight that made Emily's stomach tighten. After the visit, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. She found herself thinking back to her childhood, to the stories her mother used to tell, stories that Emily had once dismissed as fanciful tales. But now those stories took on a new significance. That night, as Emily lay in bed beside Mark, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with her grandmother. The idea that this streak might mean something more, that it wasn't just a genetic quirk gnawing at her. Mark noticed her growing obsession and tried to reassure her, telling her that it was just a coincidence. But Emily couldn't let it go. The dreams, her grandmother's reaction, the way the streak seemed to almost shimmer in the light, it all felt connected. She started researching her family history, searching for anything that might explain the streak, but found little more than names and dates. As the nights wore on, the feeling that something was hidden just beneath the surface became impossible to ignore. Emily's curiosity turned into determination. She couldn't shake the feeling that the streak in her mother's hair was more than just a quirk. The questions that haunted her dreams began to invade her waking thoughts, pushing her to dig deeper into her family's past. She started by visiting the town's historical society, hoping to find some clue in the dusty old records that might shed light on the mystery. She spent hours combing through birth certificates, marriage licenses, and faded photographs of women in her family. There were several with the same streak of white hair, but no explanations, no stories to explain why it appeared. The more she searched, the more frustrated she became. It was as if the answers were just out of reach, hidden behind layers of forgotten history. One evening, while sorting through her late mother's belongings, Emily stumbled upon something she had never seen before. An old, sealed letter addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was dated the day before her mother passed away. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. The streak is more than a physical trait. It's a connection, a legacy. You'll understand when the time is right. Emily's heart raced as she read the cryptic message. Her mother had known something she hadn't had time or perhaps the courage to fully explain. The letter only deepened the mystery, making Emily more determined to uncover the truth. A few days later, while sorting through boxes in the attic, Emily discovered an old journal that had belonged to her great-grandmother, a woman she barely remembered from childhood stories. The journal was filled with entries about visions, dreams, and a mysterious gift that seemed tied to the streak of white hair. Each entry was more unsettling than the last, speaking of a connection to something beyond the physical world, something passed down through the generations. As she read through the journal, Emily felt a growing sense of both fear and responsibility. This was no ordinary family trait. It was something much deeper, something that had shaped the lives of the women who came before her. She realized that whatever this gift was, it was now part of her daughter's life too. The weight of what she was uncovering began to press down on her. Emily couldn't help but feel protective of her daughter, worried about what this legacy might mean for her future. But the more she learned, the more she understood that she couldn't walk away now. She had to know the truth, no matter how settling it might be. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily decided to visit the old family home where her mother had grown up. The house had been empty for years, left untouched since her grandmother moved into a smaller place. It stood at the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown trees and wildflowers, a place that seemed frozen in time. As she walked up the creaking steps, a sense of anticipation washed over her, as if the house itself held the answers she sought. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. Emily wandered through the rooms, each one a relic of a lifelong past. She ran her fingers over the old furniture, imagining her mother and grandmother living their lives here, unaware of the secrets they would pass down. In the living room, she found an old photo album tucked away in a drawer. As she flipped through the pages, she saw images of women from different generations, all with the same streaks of white hair. They were smiling, living their lives, but now, knowing what she did, the smile seemed tinged with a quiet knowledge of something deeper. In the attic, she discovered a small wooden box hidden beneath a pile of blankets. Inside, there were letters, faded and fragile with age. One of them, written by her great-grandmother, spoke of a gift tied to the streak of white hair, something passed down from mother to daughter. The letter hinted at a connection to the spiritual world, a responsibility that came with the streak. The words were both fascinating and frightening. Emily felt a chill as she realized this wasn't just a family quirk. It was something much more profound. As she continued exploring the house, an elderly neighbor knocked on the door. The woman introduced herself as Miss Green, a longtime friend of Emily's great-grandmother. When she saw Emily, she smiled softly as if recognizing the familiar streak of white hair. Mrs. Green spoke quietly, sharing stories of how Emily's great-grandmother had used her gift to help others in the town, particularly during difficult times. She hinted that the woman in Emily's family had always been special, with a unique ability to sense things others couldn't. Emily listened intently, her mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. The streak wasn't just a physical trait, it was a mark of something much deeper, something spiritual. Mrs. Green's words confirmed that Emily had suspected the streak was a sign of a connection, a gift passed down through generations. It was something that couldn't be ignored or denied. The more she learned, the more Emily felt a mix of fear and awe. She was no longer just a mother protecting her child, she was the next in line to carry this legacy. The realization left her feeling both empowered and anxious. This wasn't just her story, it was her daughter's too, and Emily knew she had to embrace it, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. That night, Emily had another dream. This time it was different. The fog that had always surrounded her mother in these dreams was gone. Instead, her mother stood before her clearly, her expression calm and loving. Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her as she looked into her mother's eyes, no longer filled with the confusion that had haunted her in previous dreams. Her mother finally spoke, her voice clear and gentle, telling Emily that the streak of white hair was not something to fear. It was a blessing, a way to keep their family connected across generations, a bond that transcended the physical world. She explained that the gift was about love and protection, a way to guide those who came after. Emily's heart swelled with the understanding as her mother's words wrapped around her like a warm embrace. When Emily woke up, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced before. The unease and fear that had weighed on her for weeks seemed to lift, replaced by a deep understanding of her family's legacy. The streak wasn't just a mark of something strange or otherworldly. It was a symbol of the strength and love that had been passed down through generations of women in the family. Emily realized that her mother had been guiding her all along, leading her to this moment of acceptance and peace. The next morning, Emily shared everything with Mark. He spoke of the dreams, the journal, the old letters, and what Miss Green had told her. As she talked, Mark listened carefully, his expression serious but supportive. When she finished, he took her hand and reassured her that whatever the future held, they would face it together. He suggested that instead of fearing the streak, they should see it as a unique part of the family's identity, something to cherish and embrace. With Mark's support, Emily felt more confident than ever. She knew that this gift, this legacy, was something to be proud of. She decided that she would learn everything she could about it, preparing herself for the day when her daughter might ask about the streak in her own hair. Emily wanted to make sure her daughter grew up understanding that the streak wasn't a burden, but a blessing. A connection to the strong woman who had come before her. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your idea below. Make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. See you later with another twist.